The Bengals are 5-4 following Sunday's loss to the Texans. And for more on the matchup, we welcome in ESPN 1530's Mo Egger. I'm James Rapien, by the way. Welcome into Cincinnati Bengals Talk. You can catch Mo every single weekday, 3 to 6 on ESPN 1530 or the iHeartRadio app. Mo, I got to be honest. I think most of the people watching, listening right now expected the Bengals to be 6-3 going into that Sunday game. And we're sitting here now. They're 5-4. They play the Ravens in just over 72 hours. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of dialogue. Let's start with your biggest takeaway, the biggest topic or topics that are on your mind right now following yesterday's loss.
So I guess there's three things. First of all, I expected them to win when they got the ball back down 27-24. I mean, forget going into the game when they scored and got the ball back. I thought they're going to win, and if Tyler Boyd catches that pass in the end zone, they probably do. I guess there's three things. Number one, if I invite fans to do this, I'm not sure many will, but if I sort of let's look at this from a 30,000-foot view. To me, yesterday was about the Houston Texans. It was about a franchise that should feel really, really good about the direction they're going in. They finally have their coach, and more important, they can finally move on from Deshaun Watson, right? Like, who was going to replace him? C.J. Stroud was not perfect yesterday, and if you're like me, you thought, okay, at some point, he's not going to go the rest of the year without throwing a pick. He's going to throw one at a big time, and he did, but they got their guy, man. And yeah, we could talk about what the Bengals couldn't do up front on defense, but the ease with which they moved the ball, they were the better team yesterday. They're not there yet, but they got their guy at QB, man. After watching what he did last week, and, he's not immune to growing pains. I watched the Carolina game, but, just in watching some of the stuff nationally, it feels to me like yesterday was more about the Houston Texans. So, was it a disappointing effort? Do we have to talk about what's going to happen now without Trey Hendrickson? Sure. Why are they so clunky on offense after that first drive? All legitimate topics. But I think like the story of the game was more like the Texans are going in the right direction, man. So I'll start with that. Then the game itself, like there were a lot of like outliery sort of things. Like Joe Burrow isn't going to turn into an interception machine. Tyler Boyd will catch that pass that he dropped 9 out of 10 times, if not more frequently. Typically, hey, we're tied at 27. Let's get a stop so we can go to overtime. I'll trust a Lou Anarumo coach defense. Now, okay, why were they so bad without Sam Hubbard? What's going to happen maybe now without Trey Hendrickson? Fair and legit. But it felt like the result of the game was the combination of like a lot of just sort of weird stuff that you don't typically expect to happen with this era of Bengals football. But then there's how much are we going to look back on yesterday and go, God, that was the game that kept them from making the playoffs, winning the division. Like now we've been since week 2, we've circled this game against Baltimore, right? Well, it's going to be really tough. Even if they blew a 14-point lead yesterday, now it's a must win. If you want to win the division, now you have to win this game. And frankly, to make the playoffs, do you want to be talking about this team playing at 5-5 with a Pittsburgh team that just figures it out somehow every single week coming to town? I don't. I said to a couple of my colleagues yesterday, like what that loss did is it amplified the importance of going on the road and winning on a short week against Baltimore, which is not going to be easy and was never going to be easy. And now it's much more of a must than it should have been had they won yesterday.
I think that's the part that stinks. It's two things. One, when you start 1-3, even if you win 4 in a row, it still feels like the sky is falling when you lose a game to an upstart Texans team that, you're right, I think is talented, responded the right way multiple times. When the Bengals came out and hit them with a haymaker early, they responded. And when they hit him with a haymaker late, they also responded. Noah Brown is still open. I saw him leaving Paycor. I was leaving Paycor Stadium and Noah was just running around wide open. You could have thrown it to him yesterday. It's unbelievable. I mean, there are issues with what happened Saturday or Sunday, and there's a ton that I want to discuss. At the same time, I agree with you. And the part that makes it tougher is the fact that they're 5-4. They're in last place in the best division in football. And they have a
Yeah.
Ravens team who, by the way, isn't unbeatable. I
No.
don't know why. I mean, they just lost, but clearly they're not unbeatable. The Bengals
Right.
almost beat them at Paycor Stadium in week 2, and they were not playing that well going into that game, or even in that game did they play well. And so to me, it's just it's the combination of both where fans are today. And I get it, because if this Bengals team falls to 5-5, I think the conversation does change and the division is probably out of reach, regardless of what you do over the final 7 games.
Yeah, if you lose on Thursday, you're going to lose a game in the standings to 2 teams this weekend. I mean, then the math. To me, what happened yesterday is more about math than the nuts and bolts of winning and losing football. Because again, like, they're probably not as good as everybody was making them out to be after they won their last 2 games, and they're not as bad as people are going to pretend they are right now. They're still a good bet to make the postseason, but what if they are 5-5? And then, like, the margin for error goes away. Suddenly you can't afford a slip up where the Steelers hang around and they figure out a way to beat you late in the game, right? No, that's that's a hard to watch football team offensively, but hell, they're 6-3, man. So now you can't afford that. And so, like, I walked away from yesterday going, there are some moments that when they unfold, you go, I have a feeling we're going to be revisiting that. And maybe it's when it comes down to the venue for a playoff game. They have to play on the road because they couldn't win that game against the Texans because Tyler Boyd drops a touchdown pass. Or they're a wild card team instead of a division winner because that game against the Texans, after such a fast start, they spun their tires on offense. That to me was really what yesterday was all about. And then, the really troubling part is on the game's last play from scrimmage before the field goal, when you see Trey Hendrickson down and you're like, great double whammy, right? A player of his importance when you're already right now playing without Sam Hubbard and you've got a short week and you're about to lose. It's such a gut punch that just goes beyond losing the football game. I still think this team's going to be okay, but how much is yesterday's loss going to be something we revisit as the second half of the season unfolds? That to me was kind of the big takeaway. And look, if they go to Baltimore and win, I feel like we're going to go, okay, cool. Like, all's good. Right.
Sure. Well,
but if they're 5-5,
yesterday at noon, if I would have said they're going to beat Baltimore but lose to Houston, you would take it.
Yeah, they're going to split their next 2 games. Yes.
You would take it now.
Right.
You would assume that they would split it the other way if that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. And yet the logic aspect of this and the defense where Noah Brown, like I said, is still open, stole Jamar Chase's 7-11 chain because apparently they can't throw him the ball, even though he was out there and running routes. And 6 targets total. That's a whole nother story, but I was critical of that.
Yeah.
And I know he was limited, but defensively, that's the part that I question. I don't question Joe Burrow in crunch time. I think he tried to take over a bit. They were down by a couple of scores and he forced it. Tyler Boyd, look, you can't keep dropping the ball.
Right.
But hopefully that doesn't continue.
You give me that play this Thursday, Tyler Boyd in the middle of the play, standing near the goal line, wide open. I'll throw him the ball and feel good about it.
Sure.
I'll do it again.
And expect him to catch it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's no doubt. I mean, expectations are high for Boyd, and they should be. But this defense, I know they forced turnovers, and they forced turnovers yesterday too. And that was the theme during their 4-game winning streak. But this idea that, all right, you can give up yards and not points. I love the bend, not break mentality. But they gave up entirely too many yards. And I shouldn't see a guy a street free agent in Singletary running for 5 yards a carry on 30 rushes. It's not like he ran the ball 5 times. And so fast forward to Thursday night, if they don't have Trey Hendrickson, he's dealing with a hyperextended knee. Ian Rappaport reporting it. We'll see. It's a really short week. I think that's a tough ask. I'm not sure about Hubbard. Haven't heard much on him. He's been walking around with really nothing on his ankle, but he didn't even practice at all last week. Didn't get close to the practice field. So I'm not sure he's close. If you don't have either of those guys, can you see them slowing down Lamar Jackson when the Ravens are playing at home?
No, I mean, when Stroud took it in himself to go up 10 points, who among us didn't go, what's going to happen when that's Lamar Jackson, right? I mean, like that was my first thought was, hell, they're down 10 points, but also what's that going to look like on Thursday when it's Lamar and a Ravens offense that is cooking right now? I mean, say what you want about them blowing a 14-point lead to Cleveland. They hung 30 points on a very good defense yesterday. So, it's more than just what Lamar's going to do with his legs. Yeah, to me, that was the real gut punch came with watching Trey Hendrickson lie there on the ground. And, fortunately, it doesn't seem like it's an injury that's all that serious, but it is a quick turnaround. You already don't have Sam Hubbard. And the guys behind him on the defensive line, where's Miles Murphy been? Where's Joseph Osai been? Those guys haven't made plays. And so, yeah, the ease with which Houston move the ball, I'm a big fan of bend, don't break too, but it only works when you're getting opportune turnovers. And, God love them. They got one yesterday with Cam Taylor-Britt, right? Mm-hmm. And it gives them a chance to win. But if you keep bending, at some point you will break, right? I mean, I think that's a basic law of physics. I don't know. I was a communications major. But if you keep bending, at some point you're going to break.
It happened on the final drive.
No question. Yes, they bent.
They broke.
Yeah. They bent, yeah. And so, and by the way, against a team that kicker had never made a kick longer than 50 yards, like just keep him in front of the 35, and chances are you're going to overtime. So yeah, like Lou Anarumo is a great defensive coordinator, and this team, the way they played against Seattle, the picks they got against San Francisco, how they at least gave the team as a whole a shot yesterday, the way they played against Buffalo, as opportunistic as they've been, all that is terrific. But what happens in a week where the turnovers don't come? It's a fair question. Now, hopefully from my standpoint, hopefully they turn Baltimore over a couple of times, and like they did in the playoffs last year. But the bend but don't break thing is it feels like it's become overly reliant on we get a turnover at precisely the right time, and if you don't, is what it looks is yesterday what it looks like when the Texans didn't turn it over and they moved with ease, because that's going to be problematic, especially if you consider who they play on Thursday.
The Texans would have ran them out of the building had they not fumbled in the first half.
Yeah.
I mean, they really, I mean, they were up 20-7
mm-hmm.
after their first two possessions of the third quarter. And the only stops the Bengals were getting were fumbles. And one was self-inflicted with Houston. And then the other one, the Bengals forced, there's no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that's a tough way to live, especially without Hendrickson. I think this last thing for you, Mo, and we don't know about Trey. It's Monday morning, full disclosure for those watching. But finish this sentence. The Bengals will win on Thursday night if, and that's a very loaded sentence, but that's why we had you on, to give you really complicated questions / asks.
Joe and Jamar do Joe and Jamar things, which means let's play vertically.
Yes.
Like offensively, first of all, there's this weird thing where they're terrific in the first drive of the game and then just slow down, right? But yesterday I kept, in full disclosure for me, I was calling a UC basketball game, so I watched the first half of the game knowing the outcome, but still, why aren't we taking shots downfield? Especially as the game went on, Jamar Chase looked fine. I'm sure he was sore. Sure. As Dan Horde said on the broadcast, when he scored that touchdown that felt like it was going to turn the game around, he didn't do a backflip, didn't do the gritty. I'm sure that was reflective of him being in pain, or maybe them losing the game. I don't know. But the unwillingness to take shots downfield, to open things up, that's got to change. If it does, and it does with some degree of success, then yeah, that's how they win the game. Like this feels like the sort of game where your franchise quarterback just has to say, screw it, put the team on my back. We're going to go to Baltimore. I'm going to outplay a guy who's having an MVP season, right? If that doesn't happen with the way they're playing on defense and who they don't have, how do they win?
I think you're 100% right. And I said that going into the Arizona game when they were 1-3, I was like, doubt Joe and Jamar at your own risk.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to do it, but I think that's what's going to have to happen this week for them to get a win. He is Mo Egger. Make sure you check him out 3 to 6 every single weekday on ESPN 1530 and the iHeartRadio app. On Monday, if you're watching this, he's with Tony Pike at Twin Peaks. Mo, I appreciate the time as always. Thanks for jumping on, especially on.
You're with me at Twin Peaks. I think the day after Christmas. Is that what we're doing?
So. Oh man, I may dress up like Santa. You never know.
Well,
you never know.
It's after Christmas, but okay. Santa's
one day after. It's still Christmas.
Delivering gifts, and now he's here at Twin Peaks. Okay, I'm not sure Mrs. Claus is going to like that, but we'll explain to the kids.
And with that, thank you so much for watching right here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk.